everyone, and welcome to today's lesson. We are going to continue talking about slope. Again, in the real world, we don't usually talk about slope a whole lot. You'll hear it referred to as rate of change instead. So yesterday we found how the slope of graphs and how we could do that by doing rise over run. Today we're going to talk about two things. We have two objectives here. First objective is that given a table, we can find the slope from a table. And the second objective that we're going to cover today is if I give you 2 points on a line, but I'm not going to give you the line, can you find the slope between those 2 points? All right, so let's see what this looks like. Let's start with objective 1, finding the slope given a table. Okay, so we've talked about this a little bit before when we were discussing if something was a linear function or if it was a nonlinear function. We talked about how there had to be a constant rate of change. When we were saying that, we were saying, is there a constant slope? Okay, so in this case, if I look at my time was going up by 1, so that's constant. And if I look over here, my distance went up by 6. And then it went from 12 to 15, which is only a change of 3. And then it went back to 6. So this one is not a linear function. And I told you that in this chapter, we are only dealing with linear functions. So we are not going to be finding slope if something is not linear. So just kind of threw that one in there to kind of review what a linear function was versus a nonlinear function. So this is nonlinear, and if it is nonlinear, we cannot find the slope. Okay, so let's look at all the other ones. They will be linear from now on. Okay, so I'm going to read the problem here. It says the marching band, find the rate of change here. So let's first look up the time. Time went from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. That was a change of 1 minute. It was going up by 1. And the distance was going from 260 to 520 to 780 to 1040. And we need to figure out what that change is. Now, some of you guys can do this in your head, which is great. If that's the case, go for it every time. If you're having trouble with it, pick 2 points and always do the bottom minus the top. So in this case, I would do 520, that's my bottom number, minus my top number, 260, and that would give us a change of positive 260. Again, you can do that by hand or by calculator. Now here's where most people make a mistake. You might want to put this at the very top of your notes for today, maybe next to the title page. So we talked yesterday that slope was rise over run. If I'm talking about a t-table here, I want you to think about which axis. Is it your x-axis or is it your y-axis that shows the rise? And looking at this, the rise up and down is your y. So we're going to put our change in y over our change in x. If you want to shorten that and just put our slope is going to be y over x. A lot of people get that confused and want to put x first because it comes first. Okay, so we've got our x here, which was time, and we've got our distance, which was y. Our slope is rise over run. Our rise is 260, and our run was 1. And the only thing that I would add is a lot of times if we have a word problem like this, we will answer in words. So what changed by 260? Well, let's look at our label there. We changed 260 feet. And whenever we read a fraction, we usually use the word per. So 260 feet per 1 minute. So if it just asked for the slope, I would say our slope is 260. If it asked for what it meant, we would say it means that the marching band here traveled 260 feet per minute. All right, let's look at another one here. This one's not a word problem, so I'm not going to add labels this time. Okay, so we're going to see what our x's are changing by. Now, negatives are tough for a lot of people. Again, if you're struggling with this, pick 2 points and do bottom minus top. I'm going to write this one out, especially with the negatives. So if I chose the first 2 points, I'm going to do bottom, which is -4, minus the top, which is -2. Make sure I put that, there's 2 negatives, the subtraction sign, and then the -2. And you could use your calculator if you need to, or we could do it by hand, change that double negative to a positive. -4 plus 2. Here we are going down by 2. And if you think about it, we are getting more and more negative, so it makes sense that we were going down. On the right side, I'm going to find that change as well. 10 from 4. Okay, so 10 went to 4. We're definitely going down. And if you need to do that bottom minus top, if I choose those 2 points, bottom is 4 minus the top is 10. It was going down by 6. All right, so we're going to make a fraction. Again, think about, we want the rise on top, the y-axis on top. So -6 over -2. And here's the other mistake that people make. They want to say that this answer is -3. But use what you guys already know about your integer rules. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. So our answer here is 3. All right, so I just did 3 examples with you. See if you guys can try this one on your own. Go ahead and pause now. All right, let's see how you did. I'm gonna put my X and my Y here. Let's see what our X's were changing by. We are going up by 3. Again, if you don't know, take the bottom 3 minus the top. That would give us a change of 3. And on the other side, if I wasn't sure, I would do bottom minus the top. And that would give us a change of -15. All right, now here's the question. Is it X over Y or is it Y over X? Most common mistake. And the answer is, it is the Y over X. Change in Y over change in X. So our -15 is going to go on top over our 3. The correct answer is -5. Now, the only other thing I would add to this, it says to also describe what it means. Okay, so if I was describing what this meant, I would write it as a fraction, so -5 over 1. And we need to add our labels. So what is going down 5? And so we're going to look at that label. It was feet. So it's going down 5 feet. We read a fraction bar with the word per. So going down 5 feet per, and our other unit is second. So per 1 second or per second. And that would be how you would explain what's happening in real life. All right, if you got that one wrong, let's try another one like it. So do the first one if you got it wrong. If you got that one right, let's challenge yourself and do this algebra problem on the right. All right, go ahead and pause now. Okay, let's see how you did. The first one, our photos printed was going up by 10. Our total dollars was also going up. It was going up by 2. Again, biggest mistake is knowing which one goes on top. So we use M for slope, the letter M. We're going to put our Y on top over our X. Change in Y over change in X. And if we simplify, it would be 1/5 here. And if we explained what it meant, we'd add our labels. It meant the cost of photos. So 2 went with dollars. So I'd keep my dollar sign there. So this would be $1. Read a fraction bar with the word per. And the other one was photos printed. So it's $1 per 5 photos would be what it means. So our slope is 1/5 and our explanation is $1 per 5 photos. Okay, here's the tough one. This is the algebra one. At first glance, some of you guys might say that this is nonlinear because there are lots of gaps, but I'm going to show you why it is linear and it does have a slope. So I'm going to pick just the first 2 points. If I chose those 2 points, that was a change of 2. And this was a change of going down 1,000. So if I just did those 2 points, I would make my slope negative 1,000 over 2, which would simplify to negative 500. And I'll explain what that means here in just a second, but I'm going to show you why this is linear. Let's say I chose not 0 and 2, but let's say I chose 2 and 5. And then I would have chose 29,000 and 27,500. Well, between 2 and 5, there was a change of 3. Between 29,000 and 27,500, there was a change of negative 1,500. I made my fraction of change in y over change in x, and I simplified it. Guess what? That also simplifies to negative 500. And if I looked at the last 2 points, maybe instead of all the other ones, that was a change of 7, 5 to 12. And looked at the other 2 points, that was a change. It went down 3,500. You can use a calculator or do it by hand. And if I did change in y, which is negative 3,500, over change in x, which is 7, and I simplified it, I got negative 500. So no matter which 2 points I choose, I had the same slope. That is a constant rate of change. So this is linear. My slope is negative 500. Now let's explain what exactly that means. What is going down 500? Okay, well, that is our y, and I would put over 1 to explain this. So our elevation is going down, and I'm going to use a better word there, is decreasing. .500 feet. Then I have the fraction bar, so we read the fraction bar with the per. And there's 1, so per 1 minute or per minute would be my explanation in this problem. All right, we have now officially covered our first objective, which is finding slope given a table. We're going to focus on our second objective now, which is finding the slope given 2 points. Okay, so first off, I'm going to give you a little bit of time to copy down these notes. Okay, so there are 2 options. I'm going to put a little line between the 2 options. Option 1, this is the one that they use a lot at the high school. However, you might prefer option 2 better if you felt really comfortable with what we just did. And I'll show you what I mean here in just a second. Okay, and I will go through both options here in the notes. Then you can decide which one you like better. Okay, so option 1 is determine what these are in the problem. So there are going to be 2 points. And when I write a point, I always write a point as x comma y. And if I have 2 points, I have another x and another comma y. Now to distinguish between the 2 points, that's where they use those little, they're called subscripts, those small numbers. So since this comes first, this is my first x and my first y. And since this was my second point, this would be my second x and my second y. That's all it means. It's not like squared or anything. Everybody always thinks maybe that means that you take your x and you square it, or you take your y and you square it. That's not what it means at all. It just means that we have 2 x's and 2 y's. So we call them the first x and the first y, and the second x and the second y. And what we're going to do is we are going to figure out what numbers correspond to each of those letters there, and we're going to plug them into this formula. And you will not have to memorize this formula for the test. It will be given to you. But the formula is we take our second y, so y2, and we subtract our first y. So what we're doing there is we're finding the change in the y's. And then it's all over our second x minus our first x. Okay, so that's option 1. Option 2, we are going to put the 2 points into a t-table and do exactly what we did prior to our commercial break. Okay, so what we just did with finding slope from a table. So we would put, given our 2 points, we would put our first x in the x column and our first y in the y column. And we'd put our second x in the x column and our second y in the y column. And we would find the difference between the two, and we would put the change in y over change in x. Okay, so that's option 2. Again, you guys can decide which one you like better after seeing both of these. All right. So example 1, I'm going to do the option 1. Example 2, I will do the second option. And then again, you guys can kind of decide from there. Okay, so if you're doing option 1, the first thing is to decide what's x1, y1, x2, and y2. Okay, so I would either write it above it or below it. Okay, I know I write a point as x comma y. And here's another point, so x comma y. And I have my first x and my first y, they come first. And then over here, I have my second x and my second y, they came second. Okay, and I'm going to use this formula up above. Sorry, polar bears, I'm going to move you guys here just for a second. Okay, so the formula starts off with a fraction, and on top, your numerator there is going to be y2 minus y1. Okay, so let's look at y2. So if I'm looking at y2, I want to plug that in first. So I find y2, that is 2. And I'm going to put a minus because then I see the subtraction sign. And then I'm going to find y1. So my y1 is 5. So my numerator is 2 minus 5, which I know that that is going to be negative 3. All right, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to move on to my denominator. I have my second x. I'm looking at my second x. That is 1. I see the subtraction sign, so put minus. And then I have x1. So look over here at my work. My x1 was 4. So 1 minus 4. I know that that is negative 3. And I'm going to simplify that fraction. I know that a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So my answer here is positive. And 3 divided by 3 is 1. So my slope, or we use the letter m, is equal to 1. All right, so that was one way of doing it. Let's see a different way of doing it. And actually, I'm going to go back to this problem and do the same problem using the second method. All right, so second method, this is actually the method I prefer, but again, it's whatever you guys like the best. Make a t-table. If my point is 4, 5, see how they're written side by side? I'm going to write them side by side in my table because that's my x and that's my y. So I want to make sure 4 is on my x side and 5 is on my y side. And same with 1 and 2, side by side, write them side by side. And we just do what we did in the last section. We're going to find the change between the two sides. And if you need help, we do bottom minus top. Okay, so 4 went to 1. If you're not sure what that change is, if you struggle with doing that in your head, again, do bottom minus top. So 1 minus 4, that would give us negative 3. And on the other side, the y side, bottom minus top, 2 minus 5. That would also give us negative 3. And guess what? It corresponds to exactly what we see up there. Same does with our bottom minus top. we had 1 minus 4, and we had 2 minus 5 up here in our work. So that's why it works for both of them. Again, the hardest part on the tables is to remember which one goes on top, which is our change in y. So -3 over -3, which we already talked about, that simplifies to a slope of 1. All right, so now it's up for you guys to decide which way you like better. I'm going to do the first method on this one. And on the next one, I'll do the other method. Okay, so option 1, I need to label x1. I need to label all my parts here. So I have my first, I have x comma y. I have another point, so x comma y. And since I have my first x and my first y, and over here I have my second x and my second y. All right, so let's plug them into my formula. Again, I'm going to make the polar bear disappear. Move my equation over so I have more room for work. I'm going to start off with y2, which is 1. I'm going to subtract, and here's where it's tricky. So this is why I wanted to show this one. I have a subtraction sign, so I need to make sure I have a subtraction sign there. And then I have y1, which is also negative. So I have a subtraction sign, but I also have to put the negative there for my y1. So it's going to come up with that double negative, which I know a double negative is going to turn into a big positive or a giant plus sign there. So 1 plus 5 is going to give us 6. Okay, now I'm going to move on to my denominator. I have my x2, or second x, which is -9. I'm going to subtract because I have a subtraction sign there. And then I am subtracting x1, and my x1 is also a negative. So again, I have that double negative, which we talked about turns into a giant plus sign there. And using my integer rules, -9 plus 4 is -5. Now, you could put this as your answer. That would be perfectly fine. Another way of writing this, because it can't be simplified. Some people don't like negatives. A lot of times I don't like negatives in my denominator. Sometimes I'll move my negative up to the numerator. That works perfectly fine. Some people also put the negative just out front of the entire thing to know that it's negative. All those 3 mean the exact same thing. So you could write any of those 3 and get this problem right. All right, let's move on to the next one. Okay, I told you I'm going to use the other method. I'm going to use the table method in this one. All right, so I have the point 1, 3. Again, they're written across from each other, so write them across from each other because that's my x and that's my y. And then I have 4, 3. Again, write them across from each other, 1x, 1y. Find your change in each side. So my x's, I went from 1 to 4. I know I went up. How much did I go up by? 3. This one's a little kind of strange. 3 went to 3. That was a change of 0. Again, the hardest part is remembering which one goes on top. Remember, it's y over x. So in this case, I have 0 over 3, which everything was done perfectly, but my answer's still not right because this is not simplified. Okay, so if you have a calculator, try typing in your calculator 0 over 3 or 0 divided by 3. If you do, you will know that your answer will give you, or your calculator will give you an answer of 0. This is one of our special ones. It's anytime that there is a 0 in your problem, it's either going to be the 0 or the undefined. So that one is an example of our slope being 0. Now let's look at what an undefined slope looks like. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to make a table. I'm going to put the points 2, 3, and 2, -1. This time our x had a change of 0, and our y, let's see what this looks like if I do bottom minus top, if I'm not sure. So I'm going to do -1 minus my top, which is 3. That would give me an answer of -4. Okay, and I make my fraction. Remember, y goes on top, so -4 over 0. Now, if you put this into your calculator, what does your calculator give you? If you do it correctly, your calculator should say error, can't divide by 0. So when you get an error, this is the one that is not 0, but it's our other special one, which is undefined. Again, if you want to shorten to E2UND, that also would work for me. And so I want you guys to pause for a second here and go back to the front of your notes. There was a part that we kind of skipped in the front of your notes that looks like this. And if you could fill in the blanks over here. So if 0 is on top, these are just kind of a memory trick to work. If 0 is on top, it is okay. We will get an answer of 0. However, if 0 is under, it's not okay. So some people will say no. However, I had a student give me this really cool memory trick, and sometimes the most random things and the silliest things are the ones that stick in your mind. So what the student said, they said if 0 was under, it was, the answer was undefined. So they said to remember your undies. I know it sounds silly, but it helps me stick in my mind. So 0 is under undefined. It's not okay. All right, go ahead and pause here and see if you guys can do the last two on your own. Do 5 and 6. Choose either method because both methods will work. All right, pause here. All right, so last little bit here. Let's see how you did. I'm going to do method 1 on the first one and then method 2 on the second one. All right, so first one, I'm going to first off label my X and my Y. My X and my Y. This is my first X and my first Y, and my second X and second Y. All right, remember the formula is Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1. Okay, so I'm going to start off with Y2. So second Y is -3, and I'm going to subtract, because remember I have a subtraction sign there. And then I have Y1, which is also a negative, so I'm going to have that double negative. And I know that a double negative turns into a giant positive. So -3 plus 3 is 0. All right, then I'm going to do my X2, or my second X, which is 4. And I have a subtraction sign, so I'm going to keep that there. And then my X1 is -1. So again, I'm going to have this double negative, which I know is going to turn into a giant positive or plus sign. And so I have 4 plus 1, which is 5. All right, so I have a 0. It's one of my special ones. So think to yourself, is this one going to be an answer of 0 or undefined? If 0 is on top, my answer is 0. So that should be my final answer for my slope. All right, example 6 here. I'm going to go the table route. I'm going to put them across from each other. So -2, -3, and 2, -1. Let's see what our change in our X is. It went from -2 to +2. And if you're not sure, always do bottom minus top. You can use a calculator or do it by hand. My bottom is 2. I have to subtract my top. Now be careful when you do this. This is 2 minus and then your top. So that double negative gives me a change of 4. And then my Y's, I'm going to do bottom -1 minus my top. I have a -3 there. Double negative, I know turns into a giant positive. -1 plus 3 is 2. So that was a change of 2. It was going up by 2. All right, last step. Sometimes for people, this is the hardest step, is to remember which one goes on top. So we want our Y over our X. So we're going to put 2 over 4. And if I simplify that, it gives me a final answer of a slope of 1/2. Hopefully you guys did okay. And we have now finished the lesson. And we have covered both objectives of finding slope given a table and finding slope given 2 points. All right. If you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. There is homework tonight. Again, ask questions if you are confused. All right. See you guys later. Bye.